Good morning.
And good morning. I'm Frank Spillers.
And I'm Kim Spillers. Welcome to Rural Community Solutions, where we design family-friendly, youth-centered places. This month, we've got a lot of things going on about nutrition and health and its impact on communities and why it's important to be a healthy person.
You know, healthy people make healthy communities. So today on the show, we are going to be talking about what happens when everyone or all of your community does not have access to the food insecurity or food security. We'll have the discussion. So stay tuned as we talk to Dr. Ardyth Gillespie.
Picture, if you will, the pure raw earth. No wires, no fences, no roads, not even a farmhouse. No sign of civilization. This is what a person saw that was crossing the prairie in a wagon more than 170 years ago. They jumped off the wagon, looked around, and declared,
"This is where I want to settle and build a town. A great place to live and a great place to raise my family." So they took a risk. They built a house made out of the land, planted food to eat, and cared for the land. Then they wrote back to their friends where they came from and described the great opportunity and promise that they have found. They invited who they knew to join them in their discovery, people they had a relationship with, and so they came, family by family, and those families invited others they knew who they wanted to live with within that community. The communities grew because the needs of the families grew, so entrepreneurs started businesses to meet those community needs. Ice houses, broom factories, general stores, and many other types of sole proprietor entrepreneurial businesses started up within the community. All of our communities across this country,
all around the world, were started in this way, with a vision of the future and a plan to grow with people.
And people they did grow with. So what happens when you grow with people? What's the first thing that you had to do?
You have to feed them.
You had to plant food, right? And so you had to feed your community. And your whole community needed to have food. And so today we are so lucky to have Dr. Ardyth Gillespie.
Welcome, Ardy. We are so glad to have you. You have quite a resume, quite a bio that comes along with you. Ardyth actually happens to be a native of the community where we live in Atlantic, Iowa. But she went away to college, probably followed her parents who said, "There's nothing here." Yeah, we'll have to talk about that, actually.
Actually, they didn't.
There's a whole new thing, but so Ardy went off.
Yeah,
Ardy went off and got her education. She served for 32 years on the faculty of the Division for Nutritional Sciences at Cornell University's Community Nutrition Program out in New York. Oh gosh, she's been in academics. She's bridged extension. She's done research, family food decision making, a community collaboration and engagement and nutrition communication specialist. She's done food systems and food eating practices and fostered innovative leadership. Holy cow. It would take the whole show just to read all about Ardy's credentials and all of the experience and intelligence that she brings to her profession. And now she and her husband Gil have retired back to Cass County. So we're just so grateful that you are here. We are thankful that you're on your show. And side note, we are very grateful that you are friends of ours. So welcome.
Me too.
There you go.
Let me just, the other things in the circle, I've kind of been full circle, right? Starting here in Cass County and now back here with a lot of experiences that you mentioned. And but the other piece that might be useful for people to know is that I did start out my professional career as an extension home economist here in Pottawatomie County, and of course worked with Levon Eblin and others in extension around the area. So that's kind of brought me to being really passionate about connecting people and connecting ideas and connecting people to ideas. And I appreciated your intro, Frank, about healthy people make for healthy communities.
Mhm.
And so, because that's the way I think about food security, is that we need to consider there are multiple meetings depending on where one is in the food system and the distribution system, but we need to consider how recipients of food assistance, how they view food security. And it may be different than the way that those of us who try to provide food in the community. And of course, there are many layers. Providing food sounds easy, perhaps, but it's really a complex community, hopefully community-focused system.
So,
So,
for frame of reference, just to get people kind of up to speed, if this is the first show that you have joined us for in the last few days, or this is your first show ever, Frank and I are community developers, and this month, the rest of January, we are focusing on nutrition, and healthy people make healthy communities. So nutrition and health in general, health related to exercise, all the pieces that make us healthy people, and why that matters to community health. And it does in every single aspect. So we are really grateful to have Ardy with us today, because she's going to be talking about how the piece of whether or not people have enough food to eat, healthy, good food to eat, is an important component of community development. So Ardy, let's just go ahead and start right in. So food security, food insecurity. Talk to us a little bit about that. Maybe those are new terms to our listeners.
sure. I think although they've become much more common over the last 30 years, I remember when we started out talking about food security in academia, we had to describe it to everybody, and we still weren't sure we were in agreement about what we thought about it. So I think it is useful that a lot of people are familiar with hunger, food insecurity, food security, so I like to look at food security, that is what we want to be, rather than focusing on the problem of food insecurity. So food security, as defined by the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, is access at all times by all people within a household to enough food for an active, healthy life. So it's more than just getting food to people. As you've pointed out, it's important that it be healthy, nutritious food, that's a core part of the diet anyway, and that it really supports a healthy lifestyle, which of course brings in the need, as you mentioned, for activity, exercise, all the other things for a healthy lifestyle. But food is a core part because everybody pretty much needs to eat, wants to eat at least every day. So it's a constant in our lives, as well as something important to focus on. Then if we look at then the aspect, then community food security builds on this, of course, and it's a condition, and you can see here there's a lot of different components to community food security, the way it was defined by the Community Food Security Coalition a number of years ago. But it's when all community residents obtain a safe. We need to be sure that this food system is safe, and we know about food poisoning as well as foreign matters being in our food. So we need to think about those. It needs to be culturally acceptable, because if I need food and you give me food, like if I'm a rice eater and you give me corn, that may not be acceptable because I don't understand what it is, how it is, and I haven't developed a liking for it. But and then nutritionally adequate, which we've talked about. But then it's really important that we focus that it's based on a sustainable food system that maximizes community self-reliance and social justice. And I think the pandemic has really brought to light the importance of this sustainable system, but also community self-reliance. We could look at the example of meat in our community. When the pandemic hit, the processing and distribution system of the big business meat industry was disrupted. We were fortunate here in Cass County that we have two or three, I think at least three food processors. That is what we call lockers that process the beef and pork. And so that they were able to gear up to some extent and expand their processing. And we're also fortunate that we have a number of beef and pork producers in the community. So that put us in a much better situation than a lot of people. But we've learned from this increased demand that it's still not adequate to serve our own community. So one of the things we are talking about is, should we be expanding some of these, especially the food processing thing, to become more self-reliant?
So when you talk about expanding, so we need to help have more lockers, more processing facilities?
What? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Well, when you talk about expansion, where you think is the conversation about having more locker processing facilities? What's the expansion piece of it?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I would see this is just a conversation that I've been trying to start, but I mean, other people are talking about it too. But that could mean either expanding the capacity of those that are the processing plants, the lockers that are already operating and serving us well, or it could mean new ones. But that would have to be, we'd have to see how any of that would fit in with the community food system, with the economic development, because we want some competition, but we don't want to overdo that in terms of, because the goal is to have enough processing that that can support the businesses.
Well, that and security and accessibility still also means cost. I mean, there's a lot of food out there, but if you don't have the income to go purchase it, or specifically healthy food, I mean, buying a piece of meat from the locker is a little bit different than going to the dollar menu at a fast food restaurant as far as what healthy food is available, right?
Right. I would agree. Yeah. So, but yeah, cost, and then there are other parts of accessibility. One is transportation, or how can one get food from the system, even if it's there, to your home, to your dinner table, and that again has been an issue that has been enhanced or kind of brought into focus with the pandemic, especially when people are isolating.
So you're connected to a number of national networks. So what kind of information, what kind of issues are you focusing on in those national networks to be able to determine what kind of accessibility and affordability might take place at the local level?
Well, one of the groups that I've been working with, for a number of years, is a multi-state research group, meaning there are mostly academics from different universities around the country who have been looking broadly at food systems, the connection between food systems and health and well-being, and how those are connected, and the communication process around initiating and making decisions. And now we've just rewritten a proposal in which we are focusing specifically on food security and bringing that into the context of then community food systems. So there are some things. One of the things that I think has become really apparent to a lot of us anyway is that important the relationship and how we communicate among the different actors in a food security system. We need everybody to be at the table in terms of talking about what we need and what might work for growers, for participants, people who are going to receive the food. And also, part of my vision is a back and forth communication, a two-way communication, because we have a lot to learn from the people who are struggling to put enough food on their table. And then they can also be an asset to the process. For example, one of the families that was involved in getting food from our Grow Another Row, and we can talk more about that, but Grow Another Row project was picking up food in the beginning of the season. And then at some point she said, well, you know, I do have a garden and now I have enough food. I don't need any more. In fact, could you use some more food in the system? So she began to bring it in. So this to me is the ideals where everybody's doing what they can and we're concerned about everybody having enough food.
Well, is it a common perception, other than what the pandemic has really raised this issue, but prior to the pandemic, was it kind of a common perception that everybody has access to food and everybody is eating?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's good evidence that they don't. We know less about exactly how to solve that,
I know the evidence is pointing that there wasn't. I mean, in reality, there isn't enough food and everybody doesn't have access. But I mean, kind of the common population of perception in communities that this wasn't really an issue with them because they just had that perception that everybody had enough to eat.
Yeah, because it was kind of hidden a lot, you know. And particularly we found in a research project we did a number of years ago in Cass County, people don't want to be noticed as accepting food or being part of the food because we have a strong value for being self-sufficient. And that in fact sometimes gets in the way of people actually even asking for food when they need it.
Yeah, that's a pretty common rural type of value also, is I might be struggling, but I'm too prideful to let people know that I'm struggling.
Well,
when I spoke at a conference a number of years ago on food security in South Dakota, and one of the stories I heard, of course, the most important part about speaking at a conference like this, where they're focusing on food security, everybody from the big box stores to growers and educators, extension, and everybody, is to talk to the people and understand how they're thinking about it. And I heard about in situations where there were food pantries, but people were reluctant to come in the front door. So they had developed a system whereas they could kind of come at a time when there weren't likely any people to be watching, and they could come in the back door and get their food. So this is a real issue. And I think to further on your question, Frank, it is not well recognized, and that is also an issue. Or, people don't believe that the people who are getting food really need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been a real eye-opening experience. Kind of on the flip side of that is that people who have means, perhaps maybe middle income, upper income, and have plenty of food, it is a real eye-opening experience to see literally the need that exists in your own community. I've volunteered a few times delivering food this year, and to see the blocks, the city blocks of cars, because people don't get out, the food is delivered to their car. But to see the blocks, even in our little tiny town, of car after dozens after dozens after dozens that are lined up asking for help is very humbling and can almost bring me to tears. So I got to change subjects. So
just an example, though, County, for our listeners, Cass County, Iowa is in southwest Iowa. We're about 55 miles from Omaha and 85 miles from Des Moines, right on I-80. So we are rural, and we have a little under 14,000 people in our county. And in our town of Atlantic, Iowa, we have a little under 7,000 people of population. So this is the population that we're talking about. We're common rural area. We're common in accessibility. We're common in incomes. A lot of the rural statistics and demographics that you can find out there is pretty much here. We just don't have in Iowa and in southwest Iowa, we don't have the high poverty rate that somebody in Appalachia would have in that part of the country, or rural Kentucky. in that aspect of there, but we do have hidden pockets of poverty, and the COVID has really raised those types of issues. So that kind of gives you the overview of the population and the demographics that we are talking about.
And I guess that we're going to jump to Grow Another Row in just a second, Artie. But I guess one statistic that I did find, it's from Feeding America, the organization Feeding America. I did Iowa. 1 in 7 children in Iowa, for example, and you can just Google it for your own state. 1 in 7 children struggles with hunger. And that, I mean, if you line up 7 little bodies and one of those little bodies is hungry, that's a picture that we need to do something about. So you mentioned Grow Another Row, and since January is when gardeners start thinking about, oh, what seeds are we going to plant this year? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because maybe some of our listeners and our viewers might think that that's a really great project that they could start up in their own communities.
Yeah, we've been really pleased about how this has happened. And I would say, because in spite of what you're saying, Frank, about us average, I believe we're above average in some ways here in Cass County.
Yep.
And one of those is in our history of cooperation and collaboration and coordinating rather than competing in various areas of education or food or whatever. Not that we don't have entrepreneurs that are part of that, but we know how to work together, I think, by and large. And so it was really pleasing to me, having grown up here, but then I've been back now in the community about 5 years, but have been, connected all along in some ways. But it was really, I really felt good that what we've been saying about how we can solve problems, when people came together to start a number of programs, and one in the particular that I want to talk about today is Grow Another Row. The Grow Another Row came out of, initiated, what you might call a spark plug from a longtime group in Cass County called Healthy Cass County, our group of professionals and others interested in improving health, basically, in Cass County and beyond. And so we already had a working group on food access because of some of our understanding about what was going on in the community through our strategic planning. So this group started started connecting with other groups in the community that we knew either were already involved in food access or food security programs or might be interested. And one of these was an informal group, and there we have a number of sort of informal groups around here of us who had been meeting on a regular basis to talk about what it is we want for our community, in not just food but other ways, and then how can we coordinate or support projects or organizations that are already doing something that we think will help go towards our vision. So at any rate, started with that and invited other groups in and then set up a distribution system for connecting growers to people who needed food. We were particularly focused on fresh produce. Part of this comes out of also our health produce in the park program, which has been going on for a number of years, which is designed to do that. But we always struggle with how do we include people who can't afford to buy the food or can't afford what it is, at the same time as trying to help the producers make a living or part of a living by making some profit on their operation.
So how did Grow Another Row get set up? I mean, not in terms of the groups who did it, but what's its purpose? Tell us what's Grow Another Row?
Grow Another Row is with the idea that we want to expand, get more people involved in growing food or growing more food than they would otherwise. Plant another row beside your regular planting that you can then contribute. So my husband and I, you mentioned Gil, we planted extra potatoes and extra sweet potatoes, and but the main thing was spinach in the spring and broccoli and that kind of thing. So, and then of course you never know as a grower, you never know. I mean, and we're just really small compared to others in the community, but you never know for sure how your crop's going to do, you know, so you never know for sure what you're going to have. And of course, in this case, we didn't know what the demand was, but the idea was to get it together so we could get the food flowing to people.
So when you're talking about your garden, you and Gil garden how many acres?
Yeah, I was gonna say compared to us,
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
have a little fenced in yard here.
Yeah. Well, and we don't even have an acre of, you know, of annual produce, but we have an acre and a half or something if we include also have a permaculture, restorative agriculture with perennial plants, but that's for another day, right? But anyway, so we do grow, and like I said, we don't grow near as much as some, partly because we're limited by labor, and we're not really interested in hiring people to make a bigger operation. We're interested in mentoring people and helping people get enthusiastic about growing their own food.
How successful?
Where should we go here from here?
We just have a few minutes left. So how successful was Grow Another Row? So did gardeners step up in the area, and what happened with the people who received the food?
They stepped up. We were surprised, actually, pleasantly surprised at how many people who formerly hadn't been involved in this kind of activity before that were growers, and also growers that they grew extra rows like we asked them to consider. And then we were, as you've pointed out, we were also quite surprised, even though we knew there was a lot of food insecurity, at the number of people that lined up an hour. This wasn't really Grow Another Row, because Grow Another, but lined up an hour or two ahead, right, of the start. And that distribution, we set up sites around the community, because one of the things is to accessibility is having it where you can find it and get it, and as well as, even if it's free, you have to get it. And that worked really well, I think. We had different sites, different places. We had churches, we had people's front yards, we had at the armory, and most of these were all manned by volunteers, or I should say manned and womaned or whatever, by volunteers. And
their time to hand out
most of them, pardon?
People volunteered their time to hand out free food.
There you go. But most of them set it up, but then they weren't necessarily there. We just published the times that people could bring food, and published the times following that where people could pick up food. And it just seemed to work really well. We didn't really have a lot of food go to waste, or if there was food left at one distribution site, we'd shift it to another one that was going to happen the next day, and that sort of thing. So we're in the process now of evaluating really why it works so well and how we can make it work better.
Yeah. That is so exciting. Well, sign us up. We'll throw in another couple of rows of beets and things like that out of our garden. Right. It feels good to share.
That's right.
So what happens in the non-growing season? I mean, here we are in the middle of winter, and gardens are done. What's happening now to continue that, because we're still in the midst of COVID?
Right, exactly. And of course, that's a challenge. But we've, for example, worked with the Atlantic Food Pantry. They've been involved, I didn't mention, but the food pantries were, some of the go-to people we started with right away. And so now during the summer, actually, they started providing transportation to take food to people's homes, which was a new thing. That was, of course, dependent on volunteers. And they've also now expanded the amount of the number of people that they can handle. And of course, we can't give them fresh produce, really, but there are certainly other forms of fruits and vegetables that are part of this process. And we have expanded the notion of what foods we can distribute what foods people want, because sometimes people try things if it's free, they feel like they can afford to try it. Because if their kids don't like it, they haven't lost a lot, right? But people,
Yeah, I saw something yesterday that they were giving away. What's the squash? What's the name of the squash?
Spaghetti squash,
Like butternut squash. Yeah, they were
Okay.
giving
Oh, yeah.
and nobody would try it. And so one of the women took it home and created the recipe for what you can do with butternut squash, brought it back the next day, handed out samples, and gave a recipe card with them. And the rest is history. Everybody picked up butternut squash and they really liked it, but they didn't know what to do with it once they got it. So it's an education process.
That's an important part of the process. And often when people didn't taste it in that context, and there are a number of examples where this has been done in the classroom with kids. And then kids take it home take home the ideas to their parents. And that's, there's nothing like hands-on experience or mouth-on, maybe we should say.
That's right.
Yeah. And so we're gonna show your final graphic, and then Ardy, we're gonna have to close down. And I think we're just gonna have you back on, because this is just such an important topic.
So here's your three areas of availability of food security. You want to go through that for us, please?
Sure. Yeah, this is just kind of a way of illustrating what we've been talking about of the different components. And so even though we're focused on accessibility in the beginning, then we realized we could increase availability by people growing more rows or gardening that hadn't gardened before. But the thing that we sometimes forget about is that it's important that people appreciate what the food system can do for the community and what it can do for their own health and well-being. So that's what and they're all connected, is why I have it illustrated the way it is. So this is such an interesting graphic, because for our people on the podcast that are looking at this on the podcast, there's a triangle with food in it of availability one corner, appreciation another corner, and accessibility. So it's 3 A's of availability, appreciation, and accessibility, all make up food security at the center of the community food system. And that helps with that. So when you have the availability and people appreciate it, and there's accessibility that people can access that, then you're starting to address food security within your own community.
And that's what we're all about. So, oh my goodness, Ardy, I think we could go on for hours, because you know how passionate all of us are about helping people have good, healthy food. And so we are grateful that you are here. And I think we'll just have to have you back again.
Okay. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, we appreciate it. We'll be right back with you, but we sure thank you for those of you who have been watching and listening. We have had the pleasure of having Dr. Ardyth Gillespie join us this morning. She is a food security expert. She's spent her career helping people have nutritious, good, healthy food so that they can optimally function in their communities and their lives.
So stay with us this week. We're going to be continuing our conversation about healthy people make healthy communities, of nutrition and the aspects of how to access that nutrition. But also this week, we're going to be talking about indoor growing of produce, so people can have fresh produce and accessibility to that fresh produce. And we'll give you an idea how your community can create indoor growing systems that will help your community access fresh produce 12 months out of the year. It's a great concept, and people and schools across this country are doing it. So stay tuned this week, and we're going to show you how.
Thank you so much for joining Rural Community Solutions. You can catch us on Facebook and YouTube at 11:30 Central Time, Monday through Friday. Or you can catch our podcast in just a little while if you go to anchor.fm/Frank Spillers. Look for the podcast titled Think Like an Entrepreneur, Become a Spark Plug.
Maybe we'll have a new social network.
I like
FaceTube.
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 Hey, you enjoyed that. Hey, I caught that one. Anyway, I'm Kim Spillers.
And I'm Frank Spillers. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Central Time as we're here Monday through Friday at Rural Community Solutions TV live stream. Have a great day.
Make great choices and be healthy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.